Okay, so here we go to the second line on the right angle cross of consciousness, and we start with the 2-4. The 2-4. There are such wonderful lines in the fifth gate. The second line is inner peace. By the way, every line in the fifth gate has a blue introduction. In other words, these are all processes of getting into and working with the pattern. 2-4 rooted in inner peace, the ability to ignore the temptation to take premature action. It's about composure, a lack of composure, what it means for a sacred being to know when they don't need to use their energy, what inner peace means. I always thought this was interesting. Most people think of inner peace as being a state. It's a sacred state. Only a sacred can experience inner peace. This is the perfection of the frequency of the motor. When the motor is just perfect, all the tension is taken out of the body. That brings peacefulness. There's a assuredness, a security, a sense of well being that arises out of the line when the sacral is operating correctly. When whether it's a problem where it's a problem is that you have a lot of people who have fifth gaze that are not defined in a defined sacral, and it's not consistent. It operates very differently. So often what happens is that you get this inflation of the sacral, so you get this frequency that always overtones. Think about it. If you get to an open sacral and you're with somebody with a defined sacral, and the defined sacral being his inner peace, and they're actually correct and they're so peaceful, that does not translate to the open sacral. The open sacral will take in an overtone frequency that's distorting, and they will not feel that peacefulness. Aside from the fact that they are an open sacral and they're being conditioned with energy regardless of how it is for the sacral being. And it's one of the things that is so important about the sacral to sacral relationship. If you're a sacral at peace, any dealings with anything other than other sacred beings are going to be rewarding because you're not going to get the feedback that's satisfying. You're not, because the overtone is going to be here regardless. But when you're dealing with another sacred being, you can actually have a very powerful impact on them, because the first thing that is going to happen is that they're going to say to you, you feel unusual, you're not whatever, you're not you whenever. You're going to sense it right away. And then lies the opportunity of in some way responding to that however way you can. But it's all about not taking premature action. It does not say it's against taking action, which is often misunderstood. In other words, you can have complete inner peace and taking correct action at the same time and still be fully peaceful. This image of the absolutely clear and peaceful Zen warrior who cuts her head off and does that with complete inner peace. It's almost serene in the way in which they eliminate you. Now, it's a radical description of this, but again, I want you to understand what the line says. It says the ability to ignore the temptation to take premature action. It does not say the ability to avoid taking action. Action is always a part of the sacral. The sacral at rest is death. There's no sacral at rest. The sacral is not at rest when you sleep. It's just operating on a different compression, but it's not inactive. It can be. If it's inactive, if all sacrals were inactive all night, whoever lived in their time zone would die. We cannot live without the sacral vibration in the world. It's what keeps the world going. 2-4s have no difficulty in avoiding premature action because they rarely are ready to take an action at all, other than wandering around of their environment, feeling secure of being protected, and only ending up in those situations where there's this profound call to their unconscious. Remember that when you're calling a 2-4, it has the sun in the 5. The 4 in essence is calling that 34, 5, that progress, that demand for moving on, a demand for an increased experience, a demand for another experience, that demand to take the action in order to get to the progress. So they're always under the threat of being called to taking action. And here's the beauty of what the 2 is. The 2 says, I'm not here for just any action, I'm just not. I'm not here just for any action. When the 2-4 is operating correctly, it is always going to hear the call. But it's going to hear the call in the sense that among many different calls, there's only one certain call or certain calls that are truly resonate to. Now, if they're operating as a sacred being, then this becomes essential for them. That is, their response is going to bring them to inner peace. When I look at the fifth gate and the fact that it's the gate obviously out of the sacral, that it sets the pattern for the sacral life to see here's a place where enlightenment is mentioned. Here's a place where inner peace is mentioned. Here are all these wonderful, wonderful concepts, and to see very clearly that each and every one of them is accessible the moment of that sacral is operating correctly. So then we go to the 2-5. If you look at the secondary predispositions of the second line, you will see that it talks about power. It says the power to be comfortable with one's rhythm, or the drive for power that is constrained by its rhythm. The whole thing about the inner peace is that everything about inner peace is the focus, and the focus of the power into a pattern. It's all about the focus into the pattern. As long as they're operating within the pattern, as long as they're responding within the pattern, then that inner peace, physical inner peace, will come to them. Generators as a whole have problems with the results of the inconsistency in the physical frequency, and by the byproduct of this, many problems, most of which are related to digestive things, all kinds of things that are dependent on metabolizing energy and the way the energy is used. Sacred beings are the only beings in which the way in which they operate dictates the quality of their life. In other words, the very quality of the motor, the variability of the motor to run properly changes everything in their life, including whether or not they're open to any spiritual dimension. The 2-5 needs to be self motivated. The only thing that the second line has is a gift for composure. It's the only gift. Everything else has to be learned. What composure can do for you, and it's give you the opportunity to what before you make your move. And the rudimentary background about what the sacral is and the way that the sacral works when we talk about generators. If you look at all the things that I've talked about generators over the years, you can go to any of the sacral gates and find all the keynotes I've used there all there before. These different qualities of what it is to be a generator, what it is to be a sacral being. Okay, then we go to the 3-5.